Welcome to An Interview in History. Imagine a podcast that serves as a bridge across time, connecting listeners to the voices of history's most impactful figures. Each episode is a deep dive into the lives and legacies of these individuals, exploring not just their well-documented achievements, but also uncovering lesser-known facts that shaped their contributions to our world. From scientists who unlocked the mysteries of the universe to activists who fought for social change, each story is a testament to the indelible mark they left on society. This journey through history will not only educate, but also inspire listeners to appreciate the intricate tapestry of human progress. In this week's episode, we'll be talking with Alphonse Gabriel Capone, sometimes known by the nickname Scarface. He was an American gangster and businessman who attained notoriety during the Prohibition era as the co-founder and boss of the Chicago outfit from 1925 to 1931. His 7-year reign as a crime boss ended when he was sent to prison at the age of 33. Welcome, Mr. Capone, and thanks for joining us today. Let's start by talking about your early life. Can you tell us a bit about where you grew up?
Sure thing. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1899. My parents were Italian immigrants from Naples, hard-working folks. My dad was a barber and my mom was a seamstress. Life wasn't easy growing up, but we made do. I had 8 siblings, so you can imagine things were crowded. We had to fight for everything.
That's a big family. How did that shape you?
Well, you learn early to stick together. Growing up on the streets, we had each other's backs. I had 4 brothers and 3 sisters that survived childhood. So family was always important to me. My brother James Vincenzo Capone, who later changed his name to Richard Hart, became a prohibition agent in Homer, Nebraska. Raffaele James Capone, also known as Ralph Capone or Bottles, who took charge of my beverage industry. Salvatore Frank Capone, Ermina Capone, who died at the age of 1, Ermino John Capone, Albert Capone, Matthew Capone, and Mathilda Capone. Ralph and Frank worked with me in my empire. Frank did so until his death on April 1st, 1924. Ralph ran my bottling companies, both legal and illegal, early on, and was also the front man for the Chicago outfit until I was imprisoned for tax evasion. As kids, we learned quickly that in tough neighborhoods, you need to be tough.
Well, then, let's talk a bit about school. Did you enjoy your time there?
Not really. I left school when I was 14 after an incident with a teacher. Let's just say we had a misunderstanding. I didn't have much patience for the classroom. I wanted to be out there doing things. School wasn't for me. After that, I started picking up odd jobs, but I was more interested in the money than the work itself.
So then, when did you get involved with crime? Was there a specific turning point?
It didn't happen overnight. As a teenager, I joined some local gangs like the 5 Points Gang. I met people who showed me that you didn't have to work 9 to 5 to make a good living. By the time I was in my early 20s, I'd gotten involved in a few things. Gambling, bootlegging, protection rackets.
You pulled together a pretty tough gang, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. My gang was involved in numerous violent confrontations with rival gangs, which I guess contributed to my reputation. My mentor, Johnny Torrio, took me under his wing and brought me to Chicago. That's where things really started rolling.
Chicago, right. You made a name for yourself there. How did you build your reputation?
When I arrived in Chicago, Prohibition was in full swing. People wanted booze, and I knew how to get it for them. It was simple supply and demand. We built an empire smuggling liquor and opened speakeasies. I built my fortune by smuggling and distributing illegal alcohol during Prohibition. I ran a network of speakeasies and controlled the supply of liquor in Chicago. This was one of my primary sources of income, and I used bribery and intimidation to maintain control over the market. I was good at organizing things, making connections, and knowing who to trust. So, tell me about St. Valentine's Day. Listen to me, and listen to me good. I was not there for that incident. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, there were 7 members of a rival gang led by George Bugs Moran. They were gunned down by men disguised as police officers. I was never directly linked to the massacre. It was believed to be orchestrated by my organization as part of an ongoing war, but I was not there.
Didn't you control some brothels and gambling establishments as well?
I might have had something to do with those activities, and I might have run various gambling operations and brothels. I profited from these ventures, and my influence may have extended into city's political and law enforcement sectors to ensure these operations ran smoothly.
So you definitely had a real bad guy reputation.
Hey, I did some good too. My reputation wasn't just about the business. It was about taking care of my people. I gave back to the community, opened soup kitchens during the Depression. People don't talk about that side of me as much.
So I understand you indulge yourself quite a bit.
Yes, so what? So I indulged in custom suits, cigars, gourmet food and drink, and female companionship. When I was asked questions, I responded to those questions about my activities that I'm just a businessman giving the people what they want, and all I do is satisfy a public demand. I became a national celebrity.
That's interesting. It sounds like you saw yourself as more than just a businessman. How did you balance family life with all of this?
Family was always important to me. I married May Coughlin in 1918, and we had one son, Sonny. I tried to keep my personal life separate from the business. I wanted Sonny to grow up without knowing too much about what I did. He was my pride and joy, you know. May was supportive, too. We had our ups and downs, but she stuck by me.
By ups and downs, are you referring to your affairs?
You sure ask a lot of tough questions. Yeah, I had several affairs, which was not unusual for someone in my position, given the lifestyle I led. My relationships with women outside my marriage were flings with dancers, showgirls, and women I met through nightclubs and speakeasies. This put a strain on my marriage, but she remained by my side.
And yet, with all the success, you spent time behind bars. Can you tell us about your time in prison?
Yeah, they finally got me on tax evasion in 1931. Federal authorities became intent on jailing me and charged me with 22 counts of tax evasion. I was convicted of 5 counts. I was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. After the conviction, I replaced my defense team with experts in tax law, and my grounds for appeal were strengthened by a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, although my appeal ultimately failed. I went to Alcatraz in 34. Hard time, that place. It was isolated, cold, and not an easy place to be. I wasn't the same after I left there, to tell you the truth. My health went downhill. I caught syphilis earlier in life, and by the time I was in prison, it had really started to affect me. Alcatraz was no picnic, but it gave me time to think. I tried to keep to myself, read a bit, and focused on getting out.
When you were released, what did you do?
I went back to Florida where I had a home. I tried to keep a low profile and stay with my family. I wasn't the same guy as I was before prison. My health was bad, and I just didn't have the energy to run things like I used to. I tried to stay out of trouble and enjoy what time I had left with May and Sonny. Then looking back on your life, how do you feel about the choices you made? I did what I had to do to survive. Maybe I'd do some things differently, but you can't go back. I provided for my family and made a name for myself. Sure, some of it was rough, but we lived in a rough world. I don't have any regrets about the way I took care of my own, but yeah, there were some things that weren't pretty. But that's life, isn't it? Mr. Capone, thanks for sharing your story. Yeah, you're welcome. Capone's life and crimes continued to be a focal point in discussions about organized crime in America. His involvement in various illicit activities, such as his violent methods of maintaining power and his personal scandals, all contribute to the lasting legacy of one of history's most infamous gangsters. Al Capone died on January 25, 1947, at the age of 48. After being released from Alcatraz in 1939, he suffered from advanced syphilis, which affected his mental and physical health. He spent his final years in his home in Palm Island, Florida, under the care of his wife and family. His condition worsened, and he eventually died of a stroke and pneumonia. Capone's legacy is complex and remains controversial. He's remembered as one of the most notorious gangsters in American history, often associated with the violence and corruption of the Prohibition-era Chicago. However, some see him as a folk hero of sorts. He cultivated an image of a Robin Hood figure. In popular culture, Capone continues to be depicted in movies, books, and TV shows, often romanticized as a larger-than-life character. His life story remains a cautionary tale of crime, power, and its consequences. And now, another forgotten history. In the Roaring Twenties, Al Capone wasn't just a fearsome mob boss. He was also the proud owner of a flashy new car, which he treated like family. It was a gleaming black Cadillac, and Al affectionately named it Betty. Betty was more than just a vehicle. She was Capone's pride and joy. He polished her daily, ensuring every inch sparkled. Capone was often seen talking to Betty, promising her thrilling rides and the best parking spots. One evening, during a high-speed chase with the law, Capone swerved through the narrow streets of Chicago, narrowly avoiding capture. As he parked Betty safely in the garage, he patted her hood and said, "Betty, you're the best getaway driver I've ever had." His men couldn't help but laugh at his unusual affection for the car, but they knew better than to mock the bond Capone had with Betty. After all, she wasn't just a car. She was part of the family. Join us next week when we talk with that famous magician and escape artist, Harry Houdini. Until then, take care.